I am very excited to meet today and to have a guest in our podcast, Freedom to Be Yourself. And this is Lauroi Hартнелл. Hi, Laura. How are you today?
Hi, Katya. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thanks for being here. Today's guest is someone who helps professionals show up as their best, most desirable selves. And I'm excited to welcome Laura today, a certified advanced resume writer and career storytelling expert who helps job seekers confidently navigate their next career move. And through her boutique style services, Laura partners with professionals to craft powerful resumes and cover letters, LinkedIn profiles, and executives that truly reflect their brilliance. If you ever looked at your resume and thought, how do I explain what I really bring to the table? So that is definitely for you today, Laura, so that you
Yeah.
have in you that you realize that you like helping people with their careers.
Yeah. Like many other people out there, my path was not linear. I actually was really struggling in my own career after I had finished my master's degree. It was just failing miserably at my job search. My resume, looking back, was just a hot mess.
Yeah.
But I'm very fortunate. I have a family member who, she's retired now, but she was Canada's former military to civilian transition specialist in Canada. And she helped me out. She sent me her book. She gave me some advice on what I should do with my resume to turn things around and get some traction in my job search. Once I followed her advice, it worked like a charm. So from there, I ended up working at the University of Waterloo. And I worked in the exam center for students who had disabilities and needed accommodations. And so we had proctors who were graduate students, master's and PhD level, who would administer those tests. And a lot of them, they were also struggling in their job search as they were wrapping up their programs. And so I started on the side, just guiding them, teaching them what I had learned from my mentor and coach who got me whipped into shape. And I just really enjoyed it. I've always been a helper. And I think a lot of people who are in the career industry tend to be the helping types. And once you knew some of the strategy around implementing your job search and how to figure out ways to articulate what you really stood for and what you could do in order to bring value, it makes a world of difference. And from there, I started getting credentialed. I started taking on some subcontract projects for other writers and eventually started my own business. And here I am today, almost 8 years later, and I love what I do.
That's wonderful. And you know what? You need to have definitely passion and you have to love people and you need to have passion to help. When you were talking about disabled people, so that really touched me because that is something that we have to help. So that is for sure. And you have 8 years of experience right now. That's a long time. It's almost 10 years. So lots of hours for sure.
Yeah.
And if you think of a client, so can you share a story that stayed with you? Someone had no idea how amazing they were until they saw themselves through your eyes. Because in this case, you're not just helping them with their resumes, you have to be able to explain what they bring to the table and put it on paper. It's technically telling their story. It's not just facts.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. There are so many amazing clients I've worked with who had just wonderful transformations as far as their self-esteem and their confidence and just taking ownership of their voice. Back to when I very first started my business, I always think back to one of the first clients I worked with who he had come to Canada from China and he was doing a master's program in engineering, but he had 7 years of really good engineering experience in China. But when he started applying to jobs in Canada, he was applying for entry-level positions because he felt, I don't have Canadian experience. So he was conveying himself as not being an expert in his field, which he was at that point. He had earned that skill set and that title of, sure, he was still working on getting the official title of an engineer within Canada, but he had the engineering skill set and experience. And so I said, we need to start targeting positions that are at the proper career level for you. Because a lot of times, and I've seen this multiple times since working with this particular client, is we undersell ourselves especially if we're coming into a new country or a new industry and we think that the experience that we have isn't valid. But it absolutely is. You just have to know how to articulate it and align it to the new market that you're in.
And I have a question right away. So, when you meet a client the first time,
Yep.
so can you just explain steps that you're going through? Let's say you meet the person. Do you ask this person questions? What kind of questions do you ask? How do you put it on paper? What's the process that you follow with people that are complete strangers at first?
Yeah, that's a great question because the process is what makes this work. I need to really get to know the clients that I work with. And so when I first do a consultation with someone, I ask them right away, what's motivating them right now to work with someone like me? Where are they in their job search? Where are they feeling stuck? If they are currently working, what do they enjoy about that job? But what do they dislike? What do they want to leave behind? And so just getting a sense of where they are at that moment and what's motivating them. And then from there, I'm very upfront about the fact that I ask lots and lots of questions because that's what I need to do in order to gather all that good detail. And so I typically will follow a two-part process where if it's a new client I'm starting to work with, I'll send them detailed questionnaire. Some of it's more high level to understand maybe their leadership approach, to get more details on where they see themselves in the future of their industry, things like that. And then the rest of the questions will be very specific to whatever they have in their current resume. Most people have some kind of career document already when they come to me, but if not, we start from scratch. But I send them some questions to dig out some of those initial details. They are tasked with checking in with some of their colleagues to determine how other people see them, right? Because we're too close to ourselves and we can take for granted how special and impactful the work is that we do. But when we start to ask other people that work with us, we can start to see ourselves differently. And then, of course, gathering any metrics they might have based on the types of work that they've been doing. Not everyone has that, but if they do, it gives them that opportunity to dig in and do some research and pull the numbers that might be helpful in proving the results. So that's the first step. And then once they've completed that reflection process, which I think is the most important aspect of any job search, is you need to really reflect. We don't think back on our career very often, and it's challenging, but it's so worth it. And so after we've done that, we would then schedule, it's usually around a 90-minute branding strategy session, and we're really just digging in deeper. And I'm asking follow-up questions. It's really nice to contrast what they've put on paper, which has been more reflective and meditative. They've had a chance to think through and present it the way they want, versus asking them a question during our call, which they answer spontaneously. I get a chance to see their facial expressions, hear the tone in their voice, their body language, and all of this gives me a really good idea of their personality, who they are, how they show up, how that impacts the people around them. And so I take all this information that I've gathered, which can sometimes be like 20 pages worth of content that I just feverishly am typing away while I'm talking with people. And I take all of that and I distill it down into their personal brand, usually a 2-page resume and sometimes a LinkedIn profile and any other materials that they need for their job search. It's all about that reflection process that really is what helps people to get clear on what they want moving forward and what they have to offer.
Wow, that's a very in-depth work, that's for sure. And while you were telling me all of that, I have tons of questions right now. I have tons of questions because you know what? I've been there myself, and I can tell you when I graduated from George Brown College, and I remember the day that I went to the office there, the career office, and I asked them to help me with my resume. They helped me, but it was not really help. You know what it is? It's just so good to go to find a person that can help you because
Mhm.
14, 15 years ago, struggling to
Yeah.
find someone who can help me. Then I went to YMCA Career Center as well,
Okay.
and they helped me, but it was again, I call it very cold way. So you just, okay, so here's the template. You have to follow this, plug in the details. And I just like, okay. And I did everything that I could. I didn't know anything, no Canadian experience. And here we go. Then I went and I didn't know how many pages do I have to write? 2, 3, does it have to be an essay, or it's better to have a
Yeah.
1 page? And so I had all these questions. They couldn't really answer the questions, to tell you the truth, but probably everything changed right now. And when I applied, I wasn't hired, right? I
Mm,
think that was one of the reasons that I wasn't prepared well, and I wasn't prepared for the questions they're gonna ask me, because there can be
right.
something on paper, one thing, but if it's not congruent, if you don't know what's there and how to answer the questions, they will be asking you based on your resume. There's a pool of info, like anywhere you
Yeah.
go, GPT everywhere you go, but there's one missing point. There's no human touch,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Exactly. That the human touch goes a long way. And I think a lot of people are craving it now with so many kind of DIY, AI based solutions out there. It's nice to
That's
connect with
right.
a real person sometimes.
That's right. And I have a question. So you said 1 page or 2 page resume. What do you think is better, or it depends on each person? So can you just give some tips here?
Yeah, there's a lot of advice online that says 1 page is the standard. I think it really depends on where you are in your career and how much information you need to provide. A lot of people, if you're beyond just very entry level early on in your career, then 2 pages will be warranted because you have a good career story to tell. And so, as long as the content is aligned with whatever you're targeting and tells an engaging story that demonstrates your impact, then 2 pages would be, I think, ideal in most cases. If you're really senior or you have what's considered a portfolio career where you've worked a lot of contracts, then you can sometimes get away with 3 pages, but that would be the absolute max. And that would be in special circumstances where you're very senior, like a C-level
Mhm.
executive or a portfolio career.
I think when you're a C-level there, you're supposed to have more, because in this case, only if you just work as a CEO from the very beginning. But I think it's pretty much impossible. We all start
Yes.
from somewhere. And they like to see that, right? So their career path, so how they move from one position
Right.
to the other. That's a good thing. And I also heard that you said we are talking with my client, either it's a resume or a LinkedIn profile, or maybe both, right? Because, and
Yes.
here's my question. What's better, to have your resume or LinkedIn profile? But I think if you have a LinkedIn profile, you have to have a resume. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's important to have as many tools in your toolbox as possible in order to perform a good, diverse job search. When I chat with a lot of people, what they're doing is very narrow and focused. They're only applying online and they're using just maybe one job board. And so they're losing out on a lot of opportunity when they don't diversify their search, which would include engaging on LinkedIn. That's a great way to get discovered by recruiters because they're on there every day sourcing talent. You want to have good visibility. You don't have to become a thought leader. That can be really scary for a lot of people to put themselves out there online. I get it. I've had to try to do that myself running a business. And even I get nervous sometimes posting content online. But the best thing you can do is just start by commenting maybe once or twice a week on LinkedIn on people who are posting, whether it's articles or they're putting videos out, but it's related to the industry you're in and the type of work that you do. So just add an insightful comment, add to the conversation. And that's a great way to start getting your visibility up.
Mm.
So yeah, LinkedIn's important. The resume, you're absolutely right. Even in kind of what would be considered more referral based situations where someone maybe hand selects you or you're referred to the company by someone who already works there who's well trusted within the organization. Even in those circumstances, you usually will still need a resume because it's just a formality. And so, yeah, the more tools you can have in your toolbox, the better.
I think this is a separate episode that we can just record and talk about LinkedIn, because
Oh, yeah.
this is a huge thing that you can talk on and on. That's great. Thank you. How important, and this is again a question from a person from a perspective where I was before.
Yeah.
How important are hard skills and soft skills on your resume? What are you looking for? Is it more about hard skills or soft skills? That's a going the same question.
So that's a great question. And both are very important. And you're right, a lot of people disregard their soft skills, which are those interpersonal skills, right? Being able to communicate, being able to adapt, being flexible, having a positive attitude. Like all of that stuff is so important to creating a harmonious work culture where people feel supported or they feel like it's a collaborative environment where they can get their work done and show up and be their best selves. And so, yes, you have to think of the audience when you're writing your resume. And often the audience will be different people. The recruiter or the human resources person screening your resume, they might not really know the ins and outs of your role because that's not their expertise. Whereas the hiring manager often will. And so you have to make sure the language appeals to both audiences, someone who has in-depth knowledge of what you do versus someone who likely doesn't. And so when you incorporate your hard skills, put them in context that makes sense. Don't just assume that the person reading your resume is going to know the steps behind the scenes that take place in order to make something happen. Now, you don't have to go into a ton of detail, but enough that it makes sense for both of those audience members to understand what you've done. And then with soft skills, what I always tell people whenever I'm giving a resume review or I'm giving advice on how to maximize the impact of their document is put those soft skills in action. So don't just say, I'm a strong communicator. Give examples of how your communication style has made an impact to the work environment, right? So that is much more powerful than just saying, oh, I'm a strong communicator. Anyone can say that, right? Demonstrate how you've leveraged those particular soft skills in order to really drive change or get the results that are required of the role you're in. So yes, soft skills are very important. And the hard skills, that's required to do the job. But those soft skills are, I would say, equally as important. And a lot of time when you are going through the interviewing process, hiring managers want someone who's going to fit in with their team and fit in with the organizational culture. And attitude plays a huge role in that, right? If you've got that kind of very adaptable, very, hey, I'm motivated, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do a great job. People pick up on that, right? When they talk with you. And so demonstrating that on your resume in an interview, that's going to very much help your chances of getting that offer.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you. So, how do you help someone reconnect with their confidence and value when their resume doesn't reflect who they really are yet? Because it's
Right.
a lot of times about confidence in us, right? How we
Mhm.
put it on paper.
Sometimes they've been in a very toxic environment where maybe they're doing really good work, but it's not being valued. People aren't appreciating them. And that beats people down over time. And then they feel like they're not worthy, they're not valid. And that's really tough to have that mindset going into a job search. And so it's a matter of trying to recalibrate. Let's take a step back and really look at what you've done and think about how much different this would be if you were in an environment where people appreciate it. I always try to reassure people, like when you go through a job search, you want to be assessing the future organization, your future boss, as much as they're assessing you, because you want to make sure you're going into a company where it's a good fit, where you are going to feel valued. And I know circumstances are different for everyone. Sometimes you just have to take the job to keep the lights on, put food on the table. And I get that. But if you have the ability to be a little bit more selective, definitely look for those red flags, check in with your gut. It seems like it's going to be another toxic workplace, then you want to avoid that. But the whole process of asking all those questions, getting people to go on a walk down memory lane and pull up examples of all of the different things they've done throughout their career, maybe not even in their paid positions. Maybe we have to look at, okay, let's talk about the volunteer work you do. Let's talk about the work you do to support your family. Other examples of how they've developed their skills. We can get more creative and we can diversify based on these other life experiences. And so after we go through this whole process, I take all that away and then I reframe it based on everything they've told me. It's them. I'm not making
Yeah.
stuff up. I'm using the content they've given me based on all of our conversations. And then when I send them their resume and they read it, I've had clients cry because they're like, oh my gosh, like this is me. I never would have said this about myself. I never would have framed it this way. And that initial kind of revelation that what they've done in their career is meaningful and that there are people out there that will value that and that will see the special qualities you can bring to the table.
Yeah.
That gives them that instant boost in their career. And then, in their motivation and in their self-confidence. And then it's just a matter of trying to continuously reaffirm that. No more negative self-talk, right? Trying to give yourself those positive affirmations and just continuously checking in with them, making sure that they're on the right path and they're being persistent, persevering, I think is really being resilient in today's job search is very important.
Yeah. And speaking of that, confidence is very important as well, right? Can you show your personality on paper? What role does personality play in a professional resume? And how do we
Yeah.
show who we are on paper? Can you
Yeah.
just elaborate on that?
Yeah. I think that the personality plays a pretty big role because that's what makes you unique and separates you from a lot of other job seekers out there who have the very kind of generic, standardized sounding content that most people expect to see in a resume.
Yeah.
So when you have something that reflects your personality, and that might be more traditional, that might be more creative, but if it gives that person a sense of who you are, then it makes it so much more engaging to read because it's, hey, this is different. This sounds like a real person. Not just
Yes.
the
Yes.
standard like a lot of people, their resumes end up reading more like a job description as opposed to the unique person they are in that role. And it depends on the client and the industry they're in to a degree, right? But I've had a lot of fun with some clients doing some very creative things and it's gotten traction for them. Yeah, you just have to be true to yourself, I think, in that way.
You have to stand out. They read lots of resumes during the day, right? So, and this is where I think that's critical and will be a very provocative question right now. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But this about AI, this is where I think that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. AI is amazing. It definitely makes life easier in some circumstances. And you can definitely leverage it in your job search and help it with composing your resume. But you're absolutely right. Unless you do that deep, meaningful reflection work initially to get good stories, then the ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you're using isn't going to know how to effectively showcase you as the unique candidate that you are. Unless a resume writer out there spent hours training it on figuring out how to get it to ask the right question.
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe that's possible, but it's certainly, I don't think at this point going to be as effective as having a conversation with a real person who's coming from a place of curiosity.
Yeah. And you know what I also thought when you were answering the questions? It's also very important to have some support. What I
Mhm.
mean by that, when you do this, oh, if I have a question, I can ask Laura. So
Right.
when I'm getting ready for a job interview, I can ask Laura to help me. And you go there and you know there's someone supporting you. And that's
Yeah.
huge. You're not alone because this is what a lot of people need right now to feel I'm not alone. And that is
Right.
very important. And this is where they need a person like you. So that's the same thing, teamwork. A lot of immigrants, especially women immigrants for sure, feel like are behind or not enough because of, and let's be honest here, because of the language and cultural differences as well. So
Right.
you can actually, and this can be provocative. So if the person goes and has a perfect resume on paper, then the person goes and has a job interview and they hear lots of grammar mistakes, pronunciation mistakes. So they don't feel comfortable when there are lots of mistakes here. That's one case scenario. So do you think
Hmm.
that can be successful? And I just want you to be honest here.
Yeah.
That can help people not being frustrated every time they go and there's why did that happen? They didn't hire me. So and we let's just have a different category and people that have good grammar, good pronunciation, they're intelligible, they
Hmm.
still feel like they go and they want to say something, answer the question, and this is like a huge block in their head. They're gonna
Right.
judge me right now. So
Yeah,
let's talk about two categories here.
absolutely. It's a great question. And I think it's going to boil down in large part to the organization that you are interviewing with and how much they appreciate diversity. Because unfortunately, there are a lot of biases out there, and a lot of people that have those biases are on the hiring committee. And so, unfortunately, as hard as we try, and as amazing as our skills might be, there are going to be barriers sometimes. And that's a sad reality. But one thing that I've seen with some of my clients is taking this stealthy approach to, even before they apply, looking at company profiles, whether on their website or on LinkedIn, to see how diverse their teams are, to see, okay, are they actually reflecting their values, right? If we're talking about, I mean, there's been no shortage of research that's come out that demonstrates how important diversity is to productivity and to pushing innovation. And not just diversity, cultural diversity, but educational diversity, life experience diversity. Like, we need all these different voices and perspectives coming to the table in order to solve some of the biggest challenges, right? And so I've had clients who have been very successful where if they see everyone looks exactly the same at the company, then they say, I don't know if I'm going to bother applying there because I don't know if if my cultural background is going to be an obstacle. That's sad, but it has been effective for some of my clients. And then when it comes to going into the interview, if you are struggling with your pronunciation or your grammar, doing some practice rounds would probably help you build your confidence going into those scenarios. But regardless of whether English is your first, second, third, fourth language, it's okay to ask to repeat the question or to take a pause and think about how you want to answer something. That is completely okay. And so I think giving yourself permission in those instances to don't apologize. You are a human, right? But if you need to take a moment, take the moment to just gather your thoughts and speak as clearly and confidently as you can in that situation. And then the other kind of group where it's people, English maybe is not their native language, but their pronunciation, their grammar, the way they articulate their thoughts is very good. I have a lot of clients who have come from all over the world who apologize saying, oh, I'm so sorry, my English isn't great. And I'm thinking, your English sounds, you're so much clearer than a lot of native English speakers that I know. So do
Yes.
not
Yeah.
apologize. Own it. I think just have confidence, have conviction, and there's no need to apologize. No need to apologize for having a name that is maybe more challenging for certain people to pronounce, or apologizing because maybe you stumble on a couple words here and there. No, everyone will stumble on words. It just makes you human. And if you're interviewing at the right organization where they value diversity, then you'll be okay. And that's the type of organization you want to be a part of. If they're going to judge you because you have an accent, you don't want to be a part of that team. That's my thought anyways.
Yeah, that's right. Because you literally sign up for something you're going to struggle and eventually hate this place.
Exactly. It'll just be a toxic environment that you won't want to be a part of. And you're not going to be able to shine. If you're in an environment like that, you're not going to be able to demonstrate your brilliance. So go to a place where they appreciate you for all of you, right? Including those, what you might consider to be flaws at the time. And that's where you'll shine.
Yeah, yeah. And I have to say, you have a point. Even native speakers, they make mistakes, right?
Yeah, I do.
And even they ask, can you repeat the question, please? Because sometimes
Yes.
they just don't hear. And that's what it is. It's just normal. And
Mhm.
it's okay to make mistakes, right? To
Yeah.
think, to take a moment and reflect on what you were asked, right? So that's totally fine. So there is nothing wrong with you. When you ask, can you repeat that, please? And from your experience, what are the hidden strengths immigrants bring to the workforce that they don't even realize they have?
Yeah. I've worked with people from all across the globe, and I'm always just blown away by the sheer determination that a lot of immigrants bring to this country. And that's a scary big step to make. I've never moved away from home. I live an hour away from where I grew up. But to move to a completely different country with people who speak a different language, the culture is very different, that's a huge transition. So that just demonstrates right there how determined you are, how adaptable you are. You're able to overcome challenges. And so that right there, I think, is incredible. The other thing that I love is that different cultures approach problems differently, right? And so once again, when it comes to that diversity of perspective, I think that can really be beneficial to a company where you have people looking at things from different angles because of the life experiences they've had, and culture can play a role in it. And so being able to celebrate that and articulate how that's can be very helpful. Yeah. So immigrants, maybe I'm just lucky. I've worked with amazing people. Everyone I've worked with has just been really motivated, incredibly intelligent. Almost every person I've worked with who's been an immigrant and is new to Canada, they don't only speak two languages. A lot of them speak multiple languages. And I'm just blown away at just how incredible these people are. So smart, so strong, and just usually kind people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point that you said, determination. And I think this is the quality that we as immigrants actually teaching people that were born here, let's say Canadians, and in the States, the Americans, right? So I can see my husband is Canadian, and I can see that he looks at me and he definitely thinks, this woman is crazy. This is what I think, that we bring this craziness. You know what I mean?
In a good way.
We stir everything. Just come on, guys. It's okay. You can do it. That's not a big deal. That's not a problem. Come on, just do it. That's what I think, that for a lot of Canadians, Americans, something can be a huge problem. And we're just like, no, it's not a big deal. So let's just do that. So this is what I think, we bring this craziness in a good way. Because you got to be crazy moving to a different country. There's something crazy in you in the first place.
Yeah. And then another thing, too, that I think is really valid is that we're not just doing business with people in our own communities anymore. It is a global workplace, right? Whether you're collaborating with people on a team in a completely different continent, or you're working with customers in a completely different continent, you have to be able to navigate sometimes language barriers, but also just cultural differences. And when you come into a workplace in Canada, but maybe you're working with a team or customers in Russia or Ukraine or somewhere else in Eastern Europe, and I understand the customs when it comes to doing business. So you can actually be very helpful in mapping out the right strategy to work with those customers, or to get the team to be in sync with what's going on in Canada. And so that is very helpful, right? Is bringing that ability to navigate different cultural nuances, because that is the world we are in right now. That's just how a lot of companies operate.
So you've worked with so many professionals, right? You said 80 years of experience, a lot of people from different backgrounds. And what's the difference between someone who gets hired fast? I know very subjective it is. And I call it like a lottery or a Russian roulette. It's, you never know. You can be the smartest person in the room, and for some reason they think you're overqualified and you're hard on yourself and you're just, what's wrong with me? And there is nothing wrong. I know this is some sort of a very subjective question. What's the difference between someone who gets hired fast and someone who stays stuck in the job search?
There are so many factors at play. I think the first thing to look at is the industry you're in, right? Some industries are in decline and the jobs are just not plentiful. And so that is going to make it a lot harder to get the role. And so sometimes doing a job market analysis can be helpful, because maybe you need to learn new skills or adapt your skills and look at maybe some other opportunities that would be congruent with the type of work you've done in the past, where it wouldn't be a hard transition. So that's something I would encourage you to look at. If things are really moving slow, you're not getting any traction, it could be that it's just you're in a declining job market. Now, when it comes to the job search strategy, I think there's so many different things you can do in order to try to maximize your success. So right from the resume and there's so many different circumstances people find themselves in, right? So if you feel like you're being held back because you're overqualified, you might not be applying at the right seniority level, or you might be applying at companies that are just, unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to seniority, companies are always thinking about their bottom line and they might see a big price tag. So also looking at, okay, within the market, where are there companies that are paying good salaries for people who have very specialized experiences and have been in those roles for a longer period of time? Because there's definitely value to that. If everybody on your team is new, you're losing out on a lot of really good experience that's going to help get you to help that company reach those key objectives. Doing a bit of analysis, I think, in those areas can be helpful. And then just diversifying your job search. So not only applying to jobs online when you see them, also engaging on LinkedIn, working on building your network. And really, we say networking, but it's really all about building relationships with people. And there's something called informational interviewing you can do, which is where whether you're looking to go into a new role, a new industry, or maybe you're new to Canada and you just want to understand better the company culture, you reach out to people who are doing the jobs that you want to do and you just ask them, hey, here's my situation. Would you mind having a 15, 20-minute chat and I can ask you a few questions? A lot of people are willing to help out and provide some information that way. Or asking for advice in other areas can be helpful too, as long as it's very targeted. What's a course you would recommend someone like myself who's trying to get into this particular career path? What's a course you would recommend? And then when you take their advice, get back to them later and say, hey, thanks, I did this and this is what happened, right? Because they're invested in you now. And so continue to follow up with them and let them know what's going on with you. And then, of course, getting out into the community. Yeah, most of our work is done online. Job search is done online. But it can be very isolating sitting behind your computer all day. Looking at sites like Eventbrite, there are sites like Meetup where you can go and you can, whether it's something industry related or just something that you enjoy doing, like hiking or knitting or seeing movies, right? There's groups out there you can join in order to meet people over some kind of shared interest. And that's just good for, I think, your mental health in general, is to get out there into the community. It can lead to job developments. It can also lead to friendships. And I think avoiding that isolation is really important to having a healthy mindset in your job search. And then, like I said earlier, resilience. You're going to have rejections. Everyone does. That is just unfortunately part of the process. And so being able to, I feel your feelings initially because it does hurt, but then being able to bounce back and recover from that and say, okay, all right, back at it. And having some goals set out for that week that aren't just strictly job search related, but goals that you can set for yourself to get you out of the house, to make sure that you are being thoughtful in the actions you're taking those weeks in order to keep pushing your job search along.
Yeah, just always have this mindset that if one door closes, another one opens. And
Yeah.
maybe it's a blessing that you didn't get hired, right?
Yeah, in some
You're
cases.
in a toxic environment, so maybe it's a good thing. And in a month or two, you'll get a fantastic job that you will love. The
Right.
team, environment, everything will be
Mhm.
beautiful for you. And that's
Mhm.
what we have to always keep in mind. It's just hard. I know sometimes when you're waiting and you want that and you think, oh, the salary is good. Oh, I like the team. Oh, they were very friendly with me. You get all
Mhm.
of this in your head, right? But
Yeah.
then you get rejected and you take it personally. But they don't really know you. They
Yeah.
just saw you once. And this is what it is. We just have to learn not to take it personally, but it's easier said than done.
Definitely. It can definitely feel personal, but I mean, it really isn't. A lot of the times you might really feel like you're clicking with the people you're interviewing with, and you're like, I'm a great fit for this role, but they might already have an internal candidate that they've promised the position to. A lot of times companies do this where they'll still interview people just as a backup, even though the chances that they're going to go with an external candidate is extremely low. I think companies should be upfront about that. Unfortunately, they aren't. And so a lot of times that could be what it is. Sometimes companies will go through an interview process and sometimes multiple rounds of interviews with assignments or presentations. And it's just like crazy hoops you have to jump through. And then you don't get the offer, but then they repost the position every 3 months and they've never hired anyone. Oh yeah, I see what's a lot.
Wow,
Yes.
you
And
just
so
shocked me.
sometimes companies are either looking for a unicorn. Maybe you've heard that expression. Someone really doesn't even exist. They're just being incredibly picky. That could be the case. Or it could be more or less a ghost job where they don't actually intend on filling that role, but they want to project an image of growth at their company, or they want to gather resumes to see what competitors in their industry are doing. So unfortunately, companies can sometimes be a bit shady. So you got to,
Wow. Oh, I've
yeah, also
never heard of that.
factor that in too, that it isn't you. It is not personal. There's so much going on behind the scenes that we are unfortunately unaware of when it comes to a job search.
Thanks for saying that because a lot of people you might just make their day today. I've
Yeah.
never heard of that. And
It's
wow.
so frustrating. Start paying attention to certain companies will have the same posting constantly coming up. So that there's a red flag. They're either not serious about hiring or there's extremely high turnover, which usually means it's a toxic environment. So yeah, when you start to pay attention to these things, the alarm bells will go off.
And I think there are companies like that that do stuff like that, and you can even help the person don't apply with some companies like that. And speaking of
Yeah.
that, you were saying that there's a decline in market right now. Can you just give a little bit of job descriptions or something that is declining right now? You know what I mean? Just elaborate on decline in market because there are some
Yeah.
positions right now that are not highly in demand. So
Yeah.
we have to face that. And what
Yeah.
are
It's,
they? Just a couple, not all of them. It's hard to know all of them.
and
Just a few.
some it now my knowledge of I don't study the markets that intensely, but some of them are consistently in decline. And you can get these statistics from the government websites,
Mm.
whether that's in Canada or the United States. Usually you can find these statistics to see the growth or decline rates of certain industries and certain roles. Sometimes it's like it ebbs and flows. So for instance, I have a client I'm working with right now who's in the transportation industry. That industry is going on its third year of recession right now. And so it's a tough market. The jobs are not as plentiful. Tariffs are impacting things. Even before that, it was in decline after there was the boom during COVID when products were just going all over the place because everyone was online shopping so much. But now it's been steadily declining since then with tariffs compounding. Now, the decline won't last forever, but it's definitely going to make it a more challenging job search right now in its current recession that it's in. On the flip side, I've had clients who work in the cosmetics industry and skincare industry, and that industry was booming. It didn't matter that people were, yeah, there was like articles that came out. I think the CBC did an in-depth study on a lot of people were more willing to spend money on makeup or skincare products than food. So people were putting a lot of value, a lot of emphasis on the beauty industry. And so that industry has been doing very well lately. It's booming. Another industry that's been tough right now in Canada and in the US are, I would say, like library and archivist type positions. They've been declining recently. Hopefully that won't last forever. I think sometimes that has to do with government and who's currently in government and how they shift funding around. But unfortunately, that's been a tough market for people in those specialties. Yeah, so it's interesting. Manufacturing jobs are quite plentiful because they need people to come in and do those jobs. But right now, things are slowing down because, once again, are impacting the work. The tech sector has been going through a bit of a reckoning since COVID because they way overhired. And now they've been doing all these over the last couple of years. They've been doing mass layoffs at a lot of tech companies because the demand just isn't there that they had when it was in the COVID era. And so things shift and flux all the time. We're going through this big shift right now with AI, and we'll see how that plays out, how that will impact people's jobs. I am optimistic that it's not going to eliminate jobs. I think that we will start, if you want to be more hireable, then you have to start learning how to augment these different technologies, right? In order to streamline your work or If you can offset some of the more tedious tasks to AI, that frees up creative capacity to work on other things or to spend more time nurturing your customer or client base, right? It can be tough. Not everyone wants to learn all these new things, but the more you can try to learn, the more adaptable you'll be and the better your chances will be at becoming a viable candidate.
Yeah, and as you said, you can find it on the government website, right? So if someone wants
Yeah.
to go and check, so we'll probably put a link to that as well, if you don't mind. So we'll just
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Yeah, it's interesting to take a look at just some of the patterns.
yeah, yeah,
And things shift and change. And even though they have projections on the government website, nothing's set in stone. That could change tomorrow based on
yes,
what happens in the world.
you never know. And you also mentioned that new skills, right? So there will
Mhm.
be positions that you just have to tweak a little bit, right? So you maybe had some skills or take a course or get some sort of extra education for that. Do you suggest something like that when you see the person has everything, but there's something that you definitely would recommend for this person to let's take a course or get one more credential. Do you do stuff like that? Do you help the person with that just to make sure that the skills are looking better on the resume? So can you elaborate on that?
I definitely have clients ask me that. And I'm very hesitant to recommend particular training. I think to start out, if you're not sure, I love the school of YouTube. If you're interested in learning a new skill, there's so many ways you can get free training, free walkthroughs on how to use certain software or do different things. So I always say start with that to whet your appetite, to see if you like it, to see if it's something you want to continue to pursue. The reason I always say that is because when you start to go down the route of credentialing, it can be very expensive. And you don't necessarily know if that investment is going to pay off. Because unfortunately, in many cases, just having the credential isn't enough. You have to be able to demonstrate how you use those skills. And if you do go the route of getting this particular training, getting a particular credential, then figure out a way that you can start dabbling in doing the actual work, whether that's
Yeah.
through volunteering. There are some interesting new websites available now where you can do like little micro projects from real companies in order to test new skill sets you're working on. There's different ways that you can try to start to put those skills into action. But that's the important part is putting them into action and then showcasing how you're leveraging, how you're using those skills in your resume. Sometimes it's not always possible, depending on the company's like insurance policies, but sometimes you can job shadow even. Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely give them some ideas as to where to explore if I think that upskilling is important for them. But ultimately, I think you have to be the one making that decision about where you want to go in your career. Sometimes I have people who really want to do education, sometimes maybe a university degree because they never finished it and for that it's more for them like to feel whole, right? They feel
Yeah.
like it's something they want to do. And I say if that's something you want to do outside of the career space just to feel good about yourself, then absolutely pursue that. But I don't think we should ever try not to think, oh, this degree or this credential or this particular training is going to instantly lead me to this particular job because it's not quite that straightforward.
Yeah. And I want to ask a couple more questions related to going back to immigrants and that sometimes they feel lost and uncertain and frustrated, right? What would you want her to know today?
Yeah. First of all, I think I'd want her to know how incredibly brave she's being, just navigating this new culture, this new environment to begin with. Now, if you're feeling stuck or you're lacking confidence in the job search, I think one thing that can be really helpful is to start to build your own community. I know when you come to a new country, you're living in a new city, a new town, wherever that might be, you might feel isolated, right? Because you don't have people, you don't have friends and family with you. So start to try to build a community. There's all sorts of places you can go out and meet people. I mentioned Meetup. It's a really great site you can go to find. It's just people meeting up over different things. So maybe there's like a gardening one. You love gardening. Okay, so that's a great way for you to bond with other people who also love gardening, right? So something like that. There's also different community centers where you can go, and they often will have community events, sometimes even community events that are geared towards your particular culture, where you can meet other people maybe who are new to Canada from maybe the same region. And so there's all sorts of things to explore, but I think start building your community because that'll give you more of a support, right? People will help support you and build you up over time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you just mentioned community, and I just thought of an example that I had a student. She couldn't find a job for a long time in the tech industry, in IT, and it's interesting. I did the mindset coaching with her, and she was my pronunciation, the accent student as well. And
Hmm.
we were talking about different things. And out of the blue, she was there on Indeed.com, LinkedIn, everywhere, right? So, like searching communities online. And then I just told her, you just have to relax a little bit, just let
Yeah.
it go a little bit, let
Yeah.
it go. Don't be too attached. And guess what? Her friend reached over and said, my boss is looking for someone like you. Would you be
Okay.
interested to go and have an interview with him? And after a year and a half, almost 2 years of jobs, she got the job. And they said, we were looking for a person like you for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So, A, she was looking in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And B, just relax a little bit. Happen. Do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Don't be too attached to that, right? And guess what?
Yeah.
She found something completely different than she wanted. Because
Yeah.
guess what? She didn't really want to be in the tech and coding all the time. She loves people.
Okay, so
That's what she got. She's a product manager.
yeah.
This is what it is. And maybe that's what you can help with too. That the
Right.
person thinks that I want this, but you
Yeah.
actually help them to find what they need, right? Really, in their
And
heart.
sometimes when I coach people who are feeling stuck, they want to make some kind of transition, but they don't know what that is necessarily. Often people look at what they're good at, but don't think about, do I actually enjoy doing it? Now, work is still work, right? We do it to pay the bills. And so you're not going to wake up and love your work every single day, but you want to wake up and feel engaged, right? You don't want to hit the alarm clock and dread going into the office or opening your laptop.
90, I think 90% of people do that. To tell
Yeah.
you the truth.
Yeah, I think you're right. Unfortunately, people end up in careers sometimes just by chance, and then they just can't keep going with it. Whereas if you take a step back and really look at your day to day, think about what do I enjoy doing? What am I naturally good at? And is there overlap where I like it and I'm good at it? That's the
Yeah,
sweet spot.
yeah. Your zone of
Yeah.
genius. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Last one. What's one small but powerful thing someone can do this week to move closer to the career they really want? That they don't have to go to the 9 to 5 job that they hate, but they
Yeah.
finally start thinking, this is about me. I don't like my job. Maybe that's one thing they will start doing today and find the career and pursue the career they really want.
For someone who's in that situation, I think the best place to start, and it can be a bit of a hard exercise, but I think reevaluating your values is really important because you might be in a company or a position where there's a mismatch. And I've had clients like this before where I had a particular client who she was in sales, but it was tech sales. And she really was in her heart wanted to do something that was good for the environment. And she cared a lot about sustainability. And so she ended up, we've revamped her brand and aligned her sales experience with her passion for environmentalism. And she ended up switching into sales at a company that did like solar paneling and helped buildings become more energy efficient. And so she was much happier doing that. Right. So sometimes it's just our values aren't quite in sync with the job that we're doing. And sometimes it can just be as simple as switching to a company with a different culture where they have the same values as you. Yeah. So stepping back and really asking yourself, what matters most to me from a values perspective? That could be intrinsic, things that internally motivate you, could be extrinsic, if you're getting praise at work, if you're getting promotions. And it could be lifestyle, right? If you have a certain lifestyle you want to try to uphold, whether that's having the fancy car and the fancy house, or maybe having a slower pace of life, maybe living on a hobby farm. Like everyone's idea of what success looks like is different. And so really reevaluating what that looks like for you, not based on what other people think you should have, but what really makes you feel content. So yeah, looking at what success looks like for you and reevaluating what those key values are so that you can set your own deal breakers, right? And that will help guide your job search moving forward. And like I said, it's not necessarily an easy task. Those can be very hard questions to ask yourself, but going through and doing that process can give you a lot of clarity.
Laura, thank you so much today. That was so good. And can you please tell everybody where can they find you?
Yeah, people can find me on LinkedIn, Laura Hartnell, based out of Waterloo. I'm in Canada. And my website's laurahartnell.ca. So if you can remember my name, you can probably find me.
We'll put the links everywhere below the video, so it will all be there. So thank you so much. That was so helpful today. And
Thank
that
you.
was such a pleasure having you on the podcast.
It was a
Thank
lot of
you.
fun. I had a great time chatting with you, and hopefully we can do it again. I think
Sure.
I'm hoping that we've given someone inspiration through this.
Definitely. We just covered a lot of amazing questions today. And I also, that's no surprise that I have questions ready. Thank you, everybody. I'll put the links where you can find Laura below the video. And thank you so much for being today and see you guys next time.